So today we want to answer one question, which is, should sex be considered a need? That's it. And I strongly believe the answer is no. Before you stone me and before you click away, I just want to make sure that you understand the point of this video. It's simply to broaden the horizon of some people. And here's an example. Just like realizing that basically anyone that lives in the West can become a millionaire, especially in the day that we live in, you can realize that basically everyone can live a healthy, even thrive without satisfying sexual urges or sexual stimulation at all, right? And this way of seeing things can actually be life-changing. It's basically, of course, it's not the same level, but it's equivalent to realizing, because some of you probably had this realization at some point that, wait, this millionaire thing is actually achievable. Now, the problem is that we are living in this weird society where there's only one approach to sexual urges. And the approach is super simple. We've been taught it in school. We look at it as a need, and a need has to be taken care of. It has to be satisfied. And we've been taught this since we were kids, and the media has only been showing one thing, and the healthy way of taking care of sexual needs is basically you have to satisfy them. That's it. Now, the problem is, historically speaking, humans have always had two main ways of dealing with it, and we're not talking about the second one at all, right? And the second one, which is living without satisfying or gratifying these urges, can actually be the best way for some people. And the issue is, if it happens to be you, or if it happens to be you for a certain period, not having been given this knowledge is ridiculously detrimental to your health or your success, right? So that's the main point right now. So for anyone who's been to college, university, or heard about, in Psych 101, have you heard about Maslow's hierarchy of needs? When we're talking about motivation, right? People created a pyramid with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And by the way, he never established a pyramid with it, right? He just put them in order. But at the bottom, which is the most important basic needs before you go to the top, you have the physical needs. So you have air. No human can live without air. Water. You can't live past like 3 days without water. Food. Basically the same thing. And then right after food, there's sex in the list, right? And after that, there's like clothing, shelter, and then I think some people added homeostasis and some other things that make a lot of sense, or excretion, things that make sense. You can't live if you don't excrete, but that's a detail. The problem is, when you put sex at the same level with these needs, we can clearly see that there's a whole gap between sex and water, food, and air. Like, you literally can't survive without these, and excretion, and what else? The other thing, right? Homeostasis. You literally can't survive without them. But we literally have seen with our own eyes, most of us, people who have lived years, decades, entire lives without sex. Here's an example. Did you know that Nikola Tesla died a complete virgin? All right, he might have, used Jill, for anyone who knows Jill, but that means masturbation, by the way. But we know of people who live without sex. We know of amputees, people that are quadriplegics, who end up living a healthy, even thriving without sex. Now, there's even cultures, for example, when you look at monks, when you look at priests, forget all the bad baggage that they added to the history of those that failed, right? But it has been a traditional thing, humans living without sex, human renunciating to sexual gratification. And it's ridiculous that we keep instilling this idea that it's basically unavoidable, that there's only one way of dealing with it. And it goes so far that we are, in some schools, they actually started, I'll try to put quotes down there, right? They actually started teaching this in like kindergarten, to teach kids how to touch themselves, blah, 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 to allow themselves to get rid of sexual tension and, you know, familiarize themselves with their bodies and blah, blah, blah. This is probably for another video, but this is problematic. And before I leave, I want to at least mention one simple thing that is, to me, one of the most crucial, hard evidence of history. When you look at Hindu culture, hopefully I'm not too mistaken, which is something really interesting. The culture that wrote the book, let's quote Big Bang Theory, on how to have neat sex, was also a culture that was fully permeated with the idea of abstinence. So there's actually papers that have been written about this, because they have this weird dichotomy going on with two extremes. You can see in the same culture, when you go to the temples, they have no issue picturing or depicting sex scenes carved or painted all over, right? But at the same time, that same culture advocates abstinence, or at least the retention of your sexual energy, in the way that they word it, right? Especially for, I'm gonna say especially, but that's the one I heard the most about. For men, for example, they strongly recommend that you should not ejaculate too frequently. You should be in control of when you ejaculate, because your semen contains your energy, your life energy, and you should not just waste it. And if you think about it, it makes a little bit of sense, right? You literally procreate with that thing. Now, oddly, that culture that puts sex on a pedestal more than a lot of other cultures, of course, we can talk about the Greeks and blah, 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 but I digress. That culture that puts sex on such a high pedestal also put abstinence on basically the same equivalent pedestal. That should ring a little bell. That should let you understand that there is not just this one way. And what's good is that nowadays you can see that there's the no fat movement, you know, it's starting to catch back on again. It's in these dark recesses of the internet where people are understanding that the mainstream narrative is flawed to death. The mainstream narrative is missing a lot of components, which is actually one of the reasons of the existence of this channel. But the mainstream narrative is missing a lot of things, and it's good that somehow few cultures have this. And of course, Christians have this idea, and most religious, actually now that I think about it, most religious movements instill this idea, and somehow the mainstream media never talks about it. I'm not gonna go any further. What I'd like anyone to take out of this is, since there are two approaches, make sure that you have considered both before you just picked one. Make sure you're not just following the trends. Make sure you're not just going because TikTok told you that you should hook up. Make sure it's not because there's apps all over the place that you should just go around and sleep around, either as a guy or a girl, man or woman. Make sure that your choice was consciously made and not just following the flow of whatever's going on in this society. And I think this is one of the most important things that someone can acquire, you know, the ability to step back and pick instead of just being led and carried around by the movement of their time. And that's basically it. I'm not pushing no crazy agenda, maybe a little bit, but just remember that for some people, and if you look it up, there are stories on stories of people that let you know, yo, I just cut off this whole sex thing for 4 years and then went back at it when I was ready. And it allows some people to focus a lot more than they could. Some people become millionaires through this, where they're like, you know what, let me not just be distracted by the needs and desires. Let me this should probably wait for another video because no one said it was easy, but there are some people who just decided, you know what, I'm gonna cut this little nagging voice that's calling me. I'm just gonna ignore it and do what I need to do and focus on what I need to focus. So this could be the path that you need and you might not even know it. Now, for some others, the path is, let me go around. Actually, that's a bad path. I'm not advocating this one at all. But, you know, for some others, indulgence, and there might be seasons in your life. I'm gonna use that term, seasons in your life where the indulgence of sexual desires might be the best. But there's probably seasons in your life where you should not. Actually, if we go back again to the Kama Sutra, this book isn't only about sex positions, by the way. There's a whole lot more about simply the marital life and life in a relationship, in a sexual relationship. And one of the main things that they say, by the way, is that even in a healthy, thriving sexual relationship, long-term relationship, marriage, there should be periods where both partners decide, you know what, we're gonna cut this for a little while. There should be, you know, well, let's have no sex for 4 months, 2 months, 2 weeks, doesn't really matter, you know, but it's a healthy thing to do for both partners to decide to do this. And then, no, everybody's shocked that there's so many issues arising around the problem of sex. Now, I have said too much already. I'm gonna stop right here and edit whatever is in this video. Hopefully it was worth it. Hopefully it lit something in your mind if you were one of those that did not realize that there is a second option. Listen, maybe navigating the 21st century sexual landscape has left you a little dry and disappointed, or worried, or anxious. Maybe it's prevented you from focusing on what you were supposed to do, and you're just up to your neck with thinking about what you should do about this, what you should not do about this, especially if you're young. I would like to just let you know, though TikTok, Instagram, and the rest are telling you to do this and to do that, you should just calm down and figure this thing out. Maybe take a step back and find out where you should go. That's it.